Hi guys, I wanted to tell you Emily's birth story. So Emily was conceived about 2 years and 3 months after Jackson was born. We wanted about a 3-year age gap. Well, pregnancy was great. I think I started the pregnancy at 160 pounds, and then I lost 10 pounds, and then I developed gestational diabetes. I got tested about 28 weeks and figured out I had gestational diabetes, because of course I had gestational diabetes. I really wanted a VBAC, which is vaginal birth after cesarean, for Emily. The main reason for that is for the recovery, not recovering from major surgery, having a toddler and a newborn. Also, I know it's not a huge deal to a lot of people, and I know other women have gone through much worse, much longer period of time, but I didn't see Jackson for 17 minutes. I timed it. Until 17 minutes after he was cut out of me. And I wanted the experience of pulling him to my chest and cuddling him and snuggling him, being the first one that held him and that he smelled, and I just wanted that experience. So again, I know some babies go in the NICU, that a lot of women go through a lot more, but this was just my drive for wanting a vaginal birth after cesarean. So pregnancy went great. I've developed gestational diabetes. I was diet controlled, so that means I didn't need insulin. I just had to watch what I ate, do a finger prick, and that was great. Starting at, I think, 35 or 36 weeks, they had me go in for twice weekly NSTs, which are non-stress tests. And what they do is they listen to the baby's heartbeat on one of those monitors strapped to my belly for 15 to 20 minutes, or until they got the proper number of accelerations and decelerations, whatever they're looking for. And then I would go to the ultrasound room, and I'd have a very fast ultrasound showing the fluid level and also how the blood's moving in and out of the umbilical cord, because I guess one of the huge concerns with a lot of OBs with gestational diabetes is if I believe it's your pancreas that controls your insulin and your blood sugar and everything, doesn't do its job, then your placenta has to work harder, and your placenta can degrade prematurely if you're not, well diet controlled. I was, but again, they just kind of looked at your numbers chart of the numbers you take at home, so I think that it's just like a double precaution. Anyway, so Kaiser was never gung-ho about me having a VBAC. It's always, we'll see how you're doing, we'll see how you're doing. So it got toward the 40-week mark, and I'm getting really nervous that I'm going to be bullied into having another C-section. Because, of course, with gestational diabetes, they normally like to schedule a C-section at 39 weeks. Well, I didn't want a C-section at 39 weeks, so I got them to push it back to 41 weeks, 3 days. Also, this was before, I should say, I did know that you can refuse a C-section. I was not confident enough in myself to refuse a C-section just outright. So they let me change my scheduled C-section to 41 weeks and 3 days, which, to be honest, if you look statistically, I probably would have gone into labor by then. Because again, Jackson was born exactly at 41 weeks via induction cascade of interventions. So 40 weeks came, and I was getting nervous. So I decided to, well, first let me preface this by saying I prepared my body as best as I could. I ate the 6 dates a day. I did red raspberry leaf tea my entire pregnancy. That's supposed to tone your uterus and make your contractions more effective. I inserted evening primrose oil vaginally to help soften my cervix, because I have some scarring on my cervix, which can prevent dilation. Basically, you read about it, and I tried it. And nothing really was working. I got my cervical checks, stupidly. And I say that because cervical checks tell you nothing. They can tell you, like I've heard of women walking around at 6 centimeters for like 3 weeks, or women who are high and tight, which means no effacement, no dilation, and then like bam, 2 hours after the check they go into labor, and then they have their baby like that night or the next day. So cervical checks literally mean nothing before you go into labor. Sometimes they don't even mean that, like anything in labor. So I got cervical checks. Of course, I was a fingertip dilated, 50% effaced. So I took, well, that appointment, I'm nervous that I'm going to be put into a C-section. They're going to find out my fluid's low. It's just toward the end of my pregnancy, I start to get tired of being pregnant. I start to worry that things aren't going to go my way. I took castor oil. I took a tablespoon and a half of castor oil. There are theories about whether or not it's safe. My OB and midwife knew that I was taking the castor oil. She said it was safe. Again, from the research I've done, there just hasn't been enough study about taking castor oil in pregnancy. A lot of people say, well, the reason why there's meconium, which is when the baby has a bowel movement in utero, they can aspirate it and have some major problems. Some people say, well, the reason why a baby has meconium is just because normally when people do castor oil, they're over their due date, and that just makes the baby more likely to pass meconium. Some people say, don't do it, it's super dangerous. It can make your baby pass meconium. Well, I was desperate and nervous, so I took a tablespoon and a half of castor oil. Of course, contractions start right away, and if you don't know what castor oil does, it makes you evacuate your bowels in a loose manner. It gives you diarrhea, basically. And then that can stimulate real contractions. It can be dangerous if you let yourself get dehydrated. I took all the precautions that I could, that I read about. I made sure I drank a ton of water. I didn't take too much castor oil, because you hear some people, they take like an entire bottle of castor oil. So contractions are going, they don't stop, I'm walking. Finally, after, I don't know, 2.5 hours, 3 hours of contractions, every 3 to 4 minutes, lasting a minute to a minute and a half, we decided to go to the hospital. It is horrible. If you live anywhere in the Inland Empire, the 91 freeway is always under construction and it's always backed up. It's awful. It's awful. It's just always congested. So normally with no traffic, to get to the hospital that I wanted to deliver at, because it was closer to my in-laws, they were watching the kids, it would take about 30 minutes. Well, of course, it took like an hour and 15 minutes because of all of the traffic. I made my husband stop at a McDonald's because I heard that if you have a full bladder, it can make your contractions worse, and I convinced myself that I had to pee, and that's why the contractions were so hard. No, they hurt. And from what I know now is that castor oil can intensify them, obviously, and so that's not a true, it's not truly what early labor contractions feel like. It's just intensified. So we dropped off the kids, got to the hospital. I was 3 centimeters and like 80% effaced, so I definitely was in labor. Well, they decided to admit me because I was in active labor. Well, now I know active labor doesn't start until, I believe, 6 centimeters. So that is Kaiser mistake number 1. I was surprised because they told me that I would have to be hooked up to constant fetal monitoring. That's where you have to stay in bed unless you have a wireless unit, which Kaiser doesn't. So they can monitor the baby and the contractions. Well, when I got there, they were actually very nice, and they said, oh yeah, feel free, walk to the hospital. So they were very supportive once I got there. Well, I walked about 2 minutes, and I was like, epidural, give me the epidural. It hurts so bad. And it was all on the bottom. Like, I hear people say contractions, oh, they start in your back and they go around, or they start in the front and they go to the back. Well, I didn't have any of that. Mine were just constantly, like, right in, like, the period cramp area. Not that I have a lot of period cramps. And it was just, it hurt. So I got the epidural at 3 centimeters right away. Of course, that stalled my labor, and they told me I was not allowed to sit up. So I was laying down the entire time, and you guys know that does nothing to dilate your cervix. There's no pressure. So, again, mistake after mistake after mistake. Kaiser's fault. They should know better. But also, I should just trust my body and know that my body will have a baby properly. Because chances with nature are more often than not, your body knows what to do. There are obviously extenuating circumstances, premature labor, where just things can really go wrong. But I had a perfectly healthy pregnancy for both of those. And again, Kaiser's bad both of these times for allowing the cascade of interventions and bullying me into the epidural with Jackson and admitting me for active labor at 3 centimeters and telling me those lies. It was just... Anyway, so after I labored for 24 hours with Emily, and finally I was at 6 for like 5 hours, and my cervix started to swell. Everything that I had read up until that point was once your cervix is swelling, it's done. Like, it just doesn't go back. So once they told me that, I was like, okay, well, it's going to have to be a C-section. And my epidural was wearing off in the lower part of my stomach on one side, so they dosed me with another bulbous or whatever it's called of epidural, and I was out of it. I mean, I looked like a junkie on the streets. I couldn't function. I didn't know what day of the week it is. I barely knew I was having a baby. I did have the sense of mind to ask, okay, I'm super out of it. Can we wait for the C-section? They wouldn't let me. I was so out of it, and so they wheeled me with the C-section. They agreed, like I had always seen on TV, because I didn't see Jack, to hold her over the curtain so I could see her when she was fresh and squishy and covered in blood and placenta, so I could see her. That's great. I was so out of it, I barely remember it. I couldn't hold her because I was so out of it. I was shaking the whole time. I was falling asleep the whole time. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, was having that C-section with such a high dose of epidural with Emily. And if you've ever had a C-section, this may have happened to you, but like your heart slows really down a lot. Like, I thought that my heart was going to stop. It was horrible. And then they took their time sewing me up. It was horrible. It was just the worst experience of my life. So, from Jack's birth, it was okay, to Emily's birth, which was awful in my opinion. And the recovery was so much harder, because again, I had Jackson, I had Emily, it was so much harder the second time. I have heard that if you just get a scheduled C-section, it's easier on your body than if you labor and then have to have a C-section. But I hope I don't have to have a C-section with this baby. It's impersonal, and Kaiser won't allow a natural C-section. A natural C-section is when they put a clear sheet up so you can see your baby being born, and then they immediately do skin to skin. So your baby goes from your stomach onto your chest, and then you get to nurse right away. And that's why it's called a natural C-section, because when you have a vaginal birth, if there are no major concerns like meconium aspirations or any pre-existing concerns that they know about, the baby goes right onto the mother. It's so beneficial to breastfeeding, to bonding. Well, you don't get that with the C-section. And again, I have heard so many people rave about Kaiser and how VBAC friendly they are and how they promote mother-child bonding, but that's apparently only if you fit into a certain little percentage. It has not been my experience with both of my other children's deliveries. I'm hoping for something different. I am better informed, I am more confident in what I can do and what I will do. So that is Emily's birth story. With both of my kids, I had a lot of trouble breastfeeding in the beginning because of the swelling from the epidural and the IV medication. You'll see I'm wearing a different shirt. I filmed a lot more than the birth story in the other video, and when I came back to edit it, I realized that was a different video. More about VBACs, for me, why I want a VBAC for this pregnancy, what I'm doing, and all of that. So that's going to be a separate video. So this is Emily's birth story. As always, if you have any questions, comments, please leave them down below. And yeah, I will talk to you for the next video, which is, again, going to be all about this VBAC for this baby. VBAC trying for a VBAC for this baby. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.